Okay, let's go ahead and go through the solution to the assignment that involves using a separate accumulated depreciation account. And again, we have our random values there, so our first order of business is to copy, paste as values. Okay, so now we have a bunch of constants. And I guess the first thing we should do is go ahead and do our cost versus book value equals differential analysis. So cost, again, we have two columns, one for our 65%, another for the total 100%. So what do we have? Our cost, 242.47. Again, much easier just to use the mouse instead of typing these things manually. The total value is the cost of our share plus the fair value of the non-controlling interest, less book value given as 169,302. Our share of that, 65%. For a differential, our share, that, total, that. Okay. Next we have to explain why this differential exists. I'm going to scooch those over in one spot. Again, why does a differential exist? Well, we've got some undervalued property, plant, equipment. Again, total undervaluation is 12,878. Our share of that. Now, quite honestly, this business about here with our share, that's pretty much irrelevant. We're not doing the equity method entries. All we're doing is the elimination entries. And for the elimination entries, what we're concerned with is the 100% column. I just do both columns, just sort of force of habit. Anyway, of the differential, a portion of that has been explained by the undervalued property, plant, equipment. The remainder is going to be our goodwill. Okay, so we have a really sizable chunk of goodwill here. No harm in that, I suppose. Let's go ahead and go through our elimination entries. Again, first, our first year's entries, 2018. Elimination entries, S. We're going to have common stock. Right there. Retained earnings. Right there. Property, plant, equipment. Now again, we have a couple of ways we can do this. My preference is to treat the elimination of the date of acquisition accumulated depreciation as a separate entry. So I'm going to go ahead and write up the property, plant, equipment by the amount of its undervaluation, 12,878. And I'll do, as a separate entry down below, I'll do the accumulated depreciation elimination. Goodwill. The total goodwill. Again, for the elimination entries, we focus solely on this total column. Okay, so here's our beginning of year book value plus the unamortized differential. That total is going to be split 65-35 between the investment in little. So 65% of that plus that plus that plus that. The non-controlling interest, 35% of that plus that plus that plus that. A few people, and one thing to note before I go any further, for the first year, this credit to investment little, that is the same thing as the cost of our investment. Likewise, the credit to the non-controlling interest, that is the beginning of year fair value of the non-controlling interest. Okay, now as a separate entry, I'll go ahead and eliminate the date of acquisition accumulated depreciation, which was given as 58,338, and I credit property, plant, equipment. Again, as I've said in numerous other places, You could roll these two entries in together if you wanted to. There's certainly no harm in doing that. My personal preference is to keep them separate. If you did decide to roll those together, think of what would be happening. You'd have a debit to accumulated depreciation of $58,338, a credit to property, plant, equipment, $58,338 offset partially by a $12,878 debit. So you'd be looking at about a $45,500 credit to property, plant, equipment if you were to net those together. Okay, A for amortization. We're going to go ahead and write off this property, plant, equipment differential over its remaining life of 6 years. And again, we're using a separate accumulated depreciation account. Investment income. Again, they would get their share, 65%, of the subsidiary's adjusted/realized earnings. For the adjusted earnings, we start with the reported earnings, $77,699, and we subtract out that depreciation expense adjustment. Same thing with the income to the non-controlling interest. They would get their share, 35%, of the subsidiary's adjusted/realized earnings. And again, we start with the subsidiary's reported earnings, and we subtract out that adjustment to depreciation expense. Okay, so there's our 2018 elimination entries. Now we need to carry this stuff forward to 2019. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste so I get most of my account titles in place. And obviously I'm going to have to update some of these numbers. Okay, going down one by one. Common stock, still 22,044. Retained earnings. Last year's retained earnings was 146,818. We would add Little's income and subtract Little's dividends. Little didn't pay any dividends, so basically we're going to have last year's retained earnings plus income. Now again, that is plus, that is Little's last year's retained earnings of 146,818 plus their reported earnings. This amortization, that is not reflected on Little's income statement. That has no bearing on their retained earnings. Property, plant, equipment. Last year we debited it for $12,878. We didn't do anything else to the property, plant, equipment account. Now we do a goodwill, $198.77. We do have one thing we need to squeeze in here, and that is last year we amortized some of that differential. We amortized $2146.33. That portion is going to be carried forward as an adjustment to accumulated depreciation. The investment in Little, again, it's going to be their share, 65%, of all of this stuff in the 5 lines above. So that plus that plus that plus that minus that. The non-controlling interest, their share, 35% of that plus that plus that plus that minus that. Now you'll notice, if you'll notice, why Excel does this, I'm not sure. Sometimes when I'm doing this formula in cell M28, the border on cell M27 disappears, and I can't click on M27 to use that as a cell reference. Don't know why that happens. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But in any event, again, basically we're going to take this total value over here and split it 65-35 between the parent's investment in Little and the non-controlling interest. Then we repeat this same accumulated depreciation entry again. We're going to do this same entry over and over and over for as long as we continue to own that asset. Every year we're going to add another $21.46 to the accumulated depreciation. So next year this is going to be roughly 4,300. The year after that about 6,500, and it's going to grow year by year as we write off that property, plant, and equipment differential. Depreciation expense, same as it was last time. Investment income, their share 65% of the reported earnings. The reported 2019 earnings are 77,519 minus that depreciation adjustment. And the same thing with the income to the non-controlling interest. Their share 35% of the adjusted subsidiary earnings. We start with the reported earnings of 77,519 and subtract that depreciation adjustment. Okay, so there are our elimination entries for 2018 and 2019, assuming the use of a separate accumulated depreciation account.